A faint light reflected off Pennsylvania Avenue's rain-soaked pavement. Akira walked at a steady pace, the rhythmic click of her heels echoing against the stone sidewalk. Her expression remained composed, but her sharp gaze scanned her surroundings with practiced precision. She had grown accustomed to the relentless pace of this city, but vigilance had become second nature to her, a survival instinct honed over years of working with the United States Secret Service. From across the street, a pair of eyes followed her, watching with barely concealed suspicion. Officer Maria, a city cop with an outdated view of authority and control, had been observing her from a distance. He didn't recognize her, but there was something about Akira that unsettled him. Maybe it was the way she walked, too confident, too composed, not like everyone else. He had been a cop in this city for years, and his instincts told him she was out of place. Maria tossed his half-empty coffee cup aside and climbed into his patrol car. He decided to follow her, maintaining a safe distance. The vehicle glided along the wet street, his eyes locked onto the poised silhouette making her way toward the White House district. It didn't take Akira long to notice the tail. As the neon glow of a storefront reflected off a glass window, she caught a glimpse of the police cruiser shadowing her every step. She neither sped up nor stopped. She simply kept her pace, her expression unreadable, while her mind swiftly analyzed the situation. Encounters like this weren't new, but she had never grown used to the suspicion that officers like Maria cast her way, simply because of her appearance, because she didn't fit the mold of what they deemed normal. Maria didn't wait long. As she approached the next intersection, he abruptly pulled to the curb, flicked on his siren, and stepped out of the vehicle, one hand resting casually near his holstered firearm. "Ma'am, I need you to step over here for a moment." His tone carried the unmistakable weight of authority. Akira stopped, turning to face him with calm, measured eyes. "Is there a problem, officer?" Maria looked her up and down before shaking his head slightly, as if her composure only aggravated him further. "You're near a restricted area. I need to see some identification." Akira didn't react immediately. She knew there were no posted signs indicating any restricted zones. This wasn't the first time she had been stopped for nothing more than baseless suspicion. She exhaled quietly, slowly reaching into her handbag with careful, deliberate movements, fully aware that any sudden action could cause an officer like Maria to overreact. As she retrieved a slim leather wallet, Maria tensed slightly but maintained his stance. Flipping it open, she produced her driver's license and handed it over. Maria barely glanced at the name, Akira Vermork, but his suspicion didn't waver. "Where do you work?" Akira narrowed her eyes slightly, studying him for a moment before responding with a question of her own. "Is this a routine ID check, or am I suspected of a crime?" Maria frowned. He was used to people complying quickly, not questioning him, but this woman stood her ground, unwavering, and that irritated him. "I'm doing my job," he said firmly. "Do you have an issue with providing your identification?" Akira took a slow breath, keeping her voice steady. She had no desire to escalate the situation. "Not at all. I just want to know the specific reason I was stopped." The hesitation in Maria's eyes told her what she already knew. He had no legitimate reason beyond the biases ingrained in his thinking. But after a few beats of silence, he shrugged and handed back her ID. "You can go." Akira took the card from his hand, holding onto it firmly as she turned away. But as she took her first few steps, she heard Maria's voice behind her. "People need to remember their place around here." She paused for a brief second. She didn't turn back. She only clenched her fingers tighter. And in that moment, she knew this confrontation was far from over. 3 days later, Courtroom 4 of the E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse was packed. The tension in the air was palpable. On one side, Akira Vermork sat upright, her sharp eyes giving away no emotion. On the other, Officer Maria, the same officer who had confronted her on Pennsylvania Avenue, sat beside his attorney, his expression wavering between arrogance and unease. Akira hadn't expected that their street encounter would escalate into an official lawsuit. But the moment she walked away that night, Maria had decided not to let it go. He filed a formal complaint with the police department, accusing her of obstructing law enforcement and displaying uncooperative behavior. That made it impossible for the Secret Service to ignore the issue. The moment she was informed about the case, Akira had been summoned to Director Kyle's office. She still remembered the sharp look in his eyes as he placed a thick case file on his desk. "Davenport, what the hell is this?" Kyle asked, his voice calm but laced with irritation. Akira took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. "Officer Maria stopped me on my way to work without any legitimate cause, sir. I complied with his request for identification, did nothing to obstruct him in any way. Yet he still filed a complaint against me." Kyle flipped through the pages, scanning the documents quickly. "He claims you were in a restricted area, but according to reports from both the Secret Service and the Metropolitan Police, there were no restricted zones in that vicinity on that day." He looked up at her, his expression turning more serious. "Do you want to contest this?" Akira clenched her hands into fists on her lap. She knew she could let it go, accept the injustice like hundreds before her. But this wasn't the first time, and if she didn't stand up now, it wouldn't be the last. "Yes, sir," she said firmly. Kyle studied her for a few seconds, then nodded. "Good. I'll have Chanson handle this case." And that was how she found herself here today, staring down Maria in a courtroom. The sound of the gavel striking wood cut through the murmurs in the room. Judge McPherson entered, commanding the attention of everyone present. Court is now in session. Maria's attorney, a sharp-eyed man with salt and pepper hair, was the first to stand. "Your Honor, my client, Officer Maria, was lawfully conducting his duties on the night of the 12th when he noticed the defendant behaving suspiciously near the White House perimeter. Upon requesting her identification, she displayed uncooperative behavior, forcing my client to take necessary precautions." Akira kept her expression neutral, though anger burned beneath the surface. He was lying outright. Her lawyer, Chanson, immediately rose to counter. "Your Honor, we have video evidence from both traffic and surveillance cameras showing that Agent Vermork was fully compliant with Officer Maria's request. Furthermore, there is no record of any restricted zones in that area at the time of the incident." She placed a folder on the judge's desk. Judge McPherson flipped through the documents before turning his gaze toward Maria. "Officer, can you provide any evidence that the area was restricted on that day?" Maria swallowed hard. He glanced at his attorney, but the man had no answers to give. "Your Honor," Maria hesitated, knowing there was no way out. McPherson tapped his fingers against the desk impatiently. "Well, do you or do you not have proof?" Maria took a deep breath. "No, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. McPherson's expression darkened. "Officer, are you aware that falsifying a police report can result in suspension?" Maria's face paled. He knew he had been cornered. Akira's hands clenched under the table. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Not because she wanted to see him fall, but because justice needed to be served. McPherson scanned the courtroom. "I will need time to review all the evidence. This hearing is temporarily adjourned." The gavel struck the desk once more, but Akira knew this was only the beginning. The hearing had only just begun, but everything was already tilting in Akira Vermork's favor. The evidence Chanson had presented left Maria with no room to argue, and it was clear that this was not part of his plan. After the court adjourned for the day, Akira stepped out of the courtroom, taking a deep breath. She had prepared for a long battle, but she hadn't expected the opposition to expose their weaknesses so soon. "You all right?" Chanson asked, walking beside her. Akira nodded. "I'm fine. I just didn't think it would be this easy." Chanson smirked. "Don't celebrate just yet. Maria may be cornered, but he's not down. He'll look for a way to turn the tables." Akira knew Chanson was right. Someone like Maria, a man who had always felt power was in his hands, wouldn't accept defeat so easily. And she was right. The very next day, Akira received a strange message on her phone. "You think you can win this easily? Just wait and see." She stared at the screen, a chill running down her spine. The number was unlisted, but she didn't need to guess who had sent it. Maria. She exhaled sharply, then deleted the message without hesitation. A single threat wouldn't shake her, not after everything she had been through in her career. But that didn't mean she would ignore it. That night, she decided to meet with Kyle to report the incident. When she stepped into his office, he was already seated, his fingers interlocked as if he had been expecting her. "You're here to report something, Vermork?" Akira pulled out a chair and sat down. "Maria sent me a threat." Kyle didn't look surprised. "I figured this would happen sooner or later." Akira raised an eyebrow. "You expected this?" Kyle leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I've been doing this long enough to know that men like Maria don't go down quietly. He lost credibility in the very first hearing. If he can't win in court, he'll find another way to strike back." Akira clenched her jaw. "I'm not afraid of him." Kyle met her gaze, unwavering. "I know you're not, but I also know he's not acting alone. He has allies within the force, and that's what concerns me the most." Silence filled the room. Akira knew he was right. Maria may have been exposed, but there were plenty like him, people who would use their authority to maintain their control. Kyle sighed, pulling a thick file from his drawer. "You need to be careful. I had Maria placed under surveillance after the hearing, and he's been having some interesting meetings. He doesn't just want to beat you in court. He wants to destroy your career." Anger burned inside Akira. "So what's our next move?" Kyle smirked, his expression carrying a hint of something dangerous. "We don't wait for him to make the next move. If Maria wants to play dirty, we'll let him dig his own grave." Akira narrowed her eyes. A storm was coming, and she was ready for it. After meeting with Kyle, Akira Vermork knew she couldn't take this lightly. Maria wasn't the type to accept defeat, and his silence over the past few days only made her more cautious. Chanson had warned her that Maria wouldn't stop at simple threats. And just as predicted, less than 2 days after the initial hearing, Akira realized she was being watched. At first, it was just a passing suspicion. An unfamiliar car parked near her building, a man in a black coat lingering at the street corner, appearing to track her every movement. But then, suspicion turned into certainty. That morning, as Akira left her apartment for work, she found her car tires completely deflated. Someone had done it on purpose. She scanned the area, an icy sensation creeping up her spine. A text message pinged on her phone. "Be careful, Agent Vermork. Accidents happen unexpectedly." No name, no signature. But Akira didn't need one. She knew exactly who was behind it. Without panic, she took a screenshot of the message and immediately called Chanson. "I need to see you, now." Chanson agreed, and they met at a small cafe, a discreet spot where they could talk without attracting attention. As Akira placed her phone on the table, Chanson skimmed the message before smirking. "He's playing mind games now." Akira crossed her arms. I'm not surprised. If anything, this proves he's scared. Shanson nodded. Maria knows that if we keep pushing, he won't just lose his reputation, he'll lose his entire career. And if we find more evidence of his past misconduct, he could even be looking at prison time. Akira exhaled slowly. I'm not afraid of petty intimidation, but I am concerned about how far he's willing to go. Shanson thought for a moment. We can't let him operate unchecked. Do you have proof that he's been following you? Akira pulled out her phone and showed the photo of the unfamiliar car and the threatening message. Shanson reviewed them carefully before nodding. All right, I'll report this to Kyle. We need a stronger defensive strategy. Akira knew this was no longer just a legal battle. It was a power struggle, a fight to determine who controlled the game, and she had no intention of backing down. The breaking point that night, Akira returned home with heightened vigilance. She changed her route, checked every blind spot before stepping into her apartment. But as she shut the door behind her, a faint noise made her freeze. Something or someone was inside her apartment. Her hand instantly reached into her coat pocket, fingers wrapping around her concealed firearm. Who's there? Silence. Slowly, she stepped into the living room, scanning the space. Nothing seemed out of place, but the unsettling sense of intrusion remained. Then she saw it. A white piece of paper on her table. The handwriting was crude, hurried. I'm always watching you. Akira's jaw clenched. This wasn't just a veiled threat anymore. This was a direct warning. She immediately dialed Kyle's number. He got inside my apartment. Kyle's voice turned ice cold. You can't stay there. Get to my office. Now, we're changing our strategy. Akira inhaled deeply, forcing herself to remain calm. Maria thought he could scare her. He had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and Akira Vermork wasn't going to give him a chance to fix it. Akira Vermork was no stranger to dangerous situations, but Maria breaking into her home was an escalation she couldn't ignore. He wasn't just issuing threats from a distance anymore. He was willing to break the law just to send a message. But Akira wasn't someone who could be easily intimidated. She drove straight to Kyle's office right after the call. When she entered, Kyle was already at his desk, Maria's file pulled up on his screen. Shanson was also there, holding a thick folder. He actually got inside your home? Kyle asked, his voice low and measured. Akira nodded, tossing the threatening note onto his desk. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks. That means he either has a key or he's damn good at getting into places he shouldn't be. Shanson frowned. He's pushing this to the limit. Kyle skimmed through the documents in Shanson's hands, his eyes growing sharper. Then we push back. If he's not afraid to play dirty, we don't need to hold back either. Akira leaned against the desk, arms crossed. What's the plan? Kyle looked up at her. We go on the offensive. We don't wait for Maria to make his next move. We show him he picked the wrong person to mess with. He turned to Shanson. I want a full file on every violation he's ever committed. Any complaints of racial profiling, abuse of power. If someone reported him, I want to know. Shanson nodded, flipping open the folder. I've already looked into it. Over his career, Maria has received more than 20 complaints from civilians, mostly people of color. Most of them were dismissed, but if we compile them all, it's enough to push for a formal charge. Kyle's lips curled into a cold smile. Perfect. Then let's do it. Akira studied them both, a thought forming in her mind. But will that be enough to stop him? He's not the type to back down, especially when he knows he's losing. Shanson set the files down. Number. But we can make sure he has nowhere left to run. Kyle stood, crossing his arms as he looked between them. I'm sending this file to Internal Affairs, and we're leaking the story to the press. Once this gets out, he won't have a choice but to face the consequences." Akira considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Do it. I won't let him keep getting away with this." Shanson started preparing the case, while Kyle reached out to his media contacts. This was no longer a personal battle. It was about justice. Maria was going to be exposed. But Akira couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. He wasn't the type to sit back and accept defeat, and she needed to be ready for whatever was coming next. Akira Vermork sat in silence, staring at the message glowing on her phone screen. "You think you can destroy me? You'll regret coming after me. The game is just beginning." Maria. Anger flared inside Akira, but she pushed it down. This wasn't the time for emotions. She had been prepared for this. A second vibration, another message. But this time, it wasn't from Maria. It was Shanson. "We have a problem." Her voice was tense. Akira frowned. "What is it?" "Maria just filed a counter lawsuit against you. He's claiming you fabricated everything, that you're smearing his name and interfering with police work." Akira clenched the phone in her hand. "I expected that. He's trying to drag me down with him." "It's worse than that." Chanson's voice dropped, sounding more serious than ever. "He's spreading a narrative that you abused your position, that you're using your government connections to crush a local officer. Some newspapers are already picking it up." Akira closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. She had known Maria wouldn't go down without a fight, but she hadn't expected him to strike back this fast. "Where's Kyle?" "Working with the legal team to counter this. But if Maria can control the public perception, this won't be an easy battle." Akira stepped toward the window, looking out at the bustling city below. Out there, life moved on, but inside her, a storm was brewing. "I won't let him control the story. If he wants to turn this into a public war, then I'll fight him until the end." Chanson hesitated. "Are you sure? Once we go down this path, there's no turning back." Akira turned around, her eyes burning with determination. "I have never backed down from people like Maria." She ended the call, moving quickly. There was no time to waste. Within minutes, she was in her car, heading straight for Kyle's office. When she arrived, she found him surrounded by a group of lawyers, scanning through stacks of legal documents. "What's Maria doing?" Akira demanded as soon as she stepped in. Kyle looked up, his sharp gaze meeting hers. "He's playing a dangerous game. He's not just trying to save his career, he's trying to take you down with him." Akira smirked. "Does he really think he can do that?" Kyle leaned back against his desk. "If we don't counter this the right way, he might actually succeed. He has allies in the police force. They're painting a picture that you're abusing power, that this is a personal vendetta." Akira scoffed. "I didn't expect him to be this desperate." Kyle nodded. "We need a strategy. Chanson has already reached out to some neutral journalists to correct the narrative. But that's not enough. We need undeniable proof of his misconduct." Akira thought for a moment before speaking. "Then we go to his victims, the people he abused. If they speak out, Maria won't be able to cover it up anymore." Kyle smiled, approving of the plan. "That's a good idea. I'll have Chanson start gathering testimonies. But Akira, are you sure you want to take this all the way?" Akira locked eyes with him, her resolve stronger than ever. "I never stop halfway." The battle wasn't over yet, but she knew that if she kept pushing forward, she could still win. And Maria, he wouldn't be able to run forever. Akira sat in the small conference room at Kyle's office, eyes fixed on the computer screen as Chanson presented the findings their team had compiled. Before her was a collection of emails, text messages, and audio recordings, all pointing to one undeniable truth. Maria wasn't just an abusive cop. He was a systematic predator. Chanson tapped the screen. We have at least 3 statements from people who were victims of Maria's misconduct. One of them is a former officer who was forced out of the force after reporting him to superiors. Akira raised an eyebrow. Is she willing to go public? Not sure. She's afraid of retaliation. Even though he's been suspended, he still has friends inside the department. Kyle leaned forward. We can protect her, but she needs to believe it's worth the risk. Akira thought for a moment. I want to meet her. Chanson nodded and made the call. 2 hours later, Akira walked into a small cafe in the heart of the city. A young woman with brown hair tied low sat in the corner, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Akira approached and took a seat across from her. Thanks for meeting me. The woman, Lydia, pressed her lips together. I don't know if I can really help. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, Akira said gently. But I want you to know that you're not alone. Lydia stared down at her coffee, hands trembling. Maria ruined my life. Her voice was thick with emotion. I used to be a dedicated officer. I believed in justice. But when I spoke out about him, everything changed. He made me the traitor. My colleagues turned on me. My superiors ignored me. And in the end, I had no choice but to resign. Akira listened, anger simmering beneath her calm expression. I know that's not fair, she said. And I also know that if we do nothing, he'll keep doing this to others. Lydia let out a bitter laugh. You think I don't want to fight back? I do, but I've already lost everything. I can't afford to lose more. Akira nodded, understanding her fear. I'm not asking you to put yourself in danger, but I want you to consider something. If no one stands up, Maria will keep getting away with this. Lydia sat in silence for a long time. Then finally, she exhaled deeply. If I agree, will I be protected? Akira gave a reassuring smile. You won't be doing this alone. 3 days later, a bombshell article hit the front page of the city's biggest newspaper. Suspended officer faces multiple misconduct allegations. Victims speak out. The story wasn't just about Akira's case. It included Lydia's testimony, along with 2 other victims who had been harassed, threatened, and manipulated by Maria. The news exploded. Activists began speaking out. Protests erupted outside the police department, demanding a full investigation. Akira stood in Kyle's office, watching live footage of the protests on TV. A part of her felt relief. Justice was finally in motion. But she also knew Maria wouldn't go down without a fight. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You think you've won? This isn't over, Akira. She stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. This was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Maria had no intention of going down quietly. As the news broke about his misconduct, he spent the entire morning in his small apartment, watching the reports replay over and over. His face flashed on the screen, branded as a corrupt officer, a manipulator of victims. His fists clenched so tightly, his knuckles turned white, his eyes burning with fury. His phone rang. A familiar voice crackled through the speaker. Maria, this is bad. The higher-ups are cutting ties with you. Internal Affairs is digging into your old records. They're not going to protect you. Maria sneered. They think they can toss me aside that easily? You need to lay low. Don't make things worse. Maria ended the call and slammed his phone onto the table. Lay low? Not a chance. He had lost his badge, but he still had friends, power in the shadows, and more importantly, he knew who Akira was. Akira sensed something was wrong. After the article went public, things escalated too quickly. Support flooded in, but so did the threats. Most came from faceless trolls online, but one message sent a chill down her spine. "You think you've won? Be careful when you leave your house." She had no doubt who sent it. "Maria." Just then, Chanson entered her office, her expression grim. "We have a problem." "I know, he's angry." "Not just angry. I just got word. Maria's been reaching out to people in the underground. I don't know what he's planning, but I know he won't go down quietly." Akira frowned. "What can he do? He's lost his badge, his police protection. If he attacks me, he'll be arrested immediately." "There are a lot of ways to hurt someone without getting your hands dirty." Akira exhaled, nodding. Chanson was right. Maria wasn't the type to act impulsively. If he wanted revenge, he wouldn't get caught doing it himself. Kyle walked in, cutting through her thoughts. "We have another witness." Akira and Chanson turned toward him. "Who?" "Someone who worked with Maria in the past. He's willing to talk, but only in person." "Is it dangerous?" Chanson asked. "Of course. But if what he knows is important enough, it could expose Maria's entire network." Akira nodded. "Set up the meeting." That night, Akira arrived at the meeting spot, an abandoned parking lot on the outskirts of the city. She wasn't alone. Kyle and 2 agents accompanied her, keeping a close watch from a distance. From the shadows, a middle-aged man in a worn-out coat stepped forward. "You're Akira?" "I am, and you are?" "Call me Vincent. I used to work in the force with Maria. I know what he's done, and I know what he's planning next." Akira crossed her arms. "Then talk." Vincent glanced around, wary. "Maria isn't just a dirty cop. He has connections with some very dangerous people. He's helped them before, and now they owe him. I don't know exactly what he's planning, but I know he's reached out to some wanted criminals." Akira's heartbeat quickened. "You're saying he might use the underground to come after me?" Vincent nodded. "If I were you, I'd be very careful." Akira took a slow, steady breath. She had thought Maria was just a corrupt officer, but this was much bigger than she anticipated. She turned to Kyle. "We need to protect all our witnesses. If Maria is working with criminals, he might try to silence them." Kyle nodded. "And we need a plan to stop him before he makes a move." Akira scanned the dimly lit parking lot. Maria was cornered, and a trapped animal was the most dangerous kind. Maria had nothing left to lose. He had lost his badge, his reputation, and his protection within the force. But he still had one thing left: rage. And when a man like him was cornered, he wouldn't go down quietly. He had reached out to people in the underworld, criminals he had turned a blind eye to when he was a cop, men who now owed him favors. He didn't need to act directly. He just needed to put the right pieces in place and let others do the work for him. Akira had no doubt. Maria was striking back. 3 days after her meeting with Vincent, one of the key witnesses in the case against Maria, a former cop, was attacked right outside his home. Vincent called Akira in the middle of the night, his voice shaking with anger. "They found me. I barely made it out. If I hadn't stepped out of my car in time, I'd be dead." Akira gripped her phone tightly. "Are you hurt?" "Number, but I can't stay here. They'll come back." Akira turned to Kyle, standing beside her, his expression grave. "It started." Kyle nodded. "We need to protect the others." She immediately contacted Chanson and the security team. Protective measures were issued overnight. Every witness connected to Maria's case was moved to a secure location. But there was a bigger problem. Maria wasn't just targeting the witnesses. He was coming for Akira herself. 2 days later, Akira noticed someone tailing her. At first, she thought she was just being paranoid. But as she left her office and walked to the parking garage, the feeling intensified. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Instead, she used the car's side mirror to confirm her suspicion. A black car with tinted windows was parked a few meters away. No license plate. She knew immediately. Keeping her movements calm, she opened her car door, one hand discreetly gripping the gun inside her jacket. She wasn't about to make a scene, but she also wasn't about to be caught off guard. The moment she started the engine, the car behind her did the same. It was him. She exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel, then pulled out onto the main road. The car followed. She didn't act immediately. Instead, she took a long route through the city, testing them, watching them. Every turn she made, they mirrored. She glanced at the rearview mirror. Maria wasn't stupid enough to follow her himself, but he had sent someone. Akira took a deep breath and suddenly turned onto a narrow street. The car hesitated for a second before speeding up to catch her. She gritted her teeth. "All right, you want to play? Let's play." Slamming the accelerator, she merged onto a busy avenue. The traffic light ahead turned yellow, then red. She hit the brakes hard. The car behind her screeched to a stop, barely avoiding a collision. For a split second, she saw the driver clearly. A stranger, but a familiar one. One of the criminals Maria had protected in the past. Akira grabbed her phone, dialing Kyle. "I've got a tail. I need an ID. Where are you?" "Near the North Commercial District. Sending a photo now." She snapped a picture and sent it. Within seconds, Kyle replied, "That guy is dangerous. Prior record for violent assaults and armed attacks." Akira tightened her grip on the wheel. Maria definitely hired him. A pause, then Kyle asked, "What's your move?" Akira glanced at the rearview mirror again. Her pursuer was turning away, retreating. She knew this wasn't over. "We need to make him come out of hiding." The showdown between Akira and Maria had entered its most dangerous phase. Maria wasn't just a disgraced ex-cop. He was working with criminals, willing to do whatever it took to take her down. And Akira knew one thing for sure. If she didn't strike first, she would be his next target. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. Maria had nothing left to lose. But he still had one thing: hatred. Ever since his suspension, he had become a wild animal, lost and desperate. His rage wasn't just directed at the system. It was personal. It was aimed at Akira, the one who had taken everything from him. And for a man like Maria, revenge was never simple. He wouldn't strike directly. He wouldn't make himself an easy target. Instead, he would start a game. A dangerous one. A game he believed Akira would never escape. The call came in the middle of the night. Kyle's voice was tense. "We have a problem. One of our witnesses, Lucas, has disappeared." Akira immediately sat up. "Disappeared?" "Yeah, no one knows where he went. Security footage shows him leaving his apartment at 10 p.m. After that, nothing." Akira gripped her phone tighter. Lucas was a key witness against Maria. If he was missing, someone had made sure of it. "Maria? I'd bet on it, but we have no proof." Akira closed her eyes, thinking. Maria was smart. He wouldn't act alone, but someone had done this for him. She opened her laptop, accessing Lucas's apartment security system. As she watched the footage, something felt off. Lucas left alone. No one was following him, no sign of force, but one small detail caught her attention. His face. He wasn't afraid, no hesitation, no sign of distress. Instead, he looked calm, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. 4 hours later, they found Lucas. His body was dumped in a dark alley on the outskirts of the city. The injuries on him told the full story. He had been tortured before he was killed. Kyle called Akira immediately. "You need to get here." She drove straight to the scene. Police had already cordoned off the area. Stepping out of her car, she stared at Lucas's lifeless body. Shanson walked up beside her, voice grim. "This is a message?" Akira didn't need to ask. She already knew. Maria hadn't just killed Lucas. He wanted to send a warning to her. But Maria had made a mistake. He thought this would scare her. He thought she would back down. He was wrong. It was time to strike back. Akira turned to Kyle and Shanson, her eyes burning with determination. "We end this, now." Kyle nodded. "I've been tracking Maria's finances since his suspension. A large withdrawal was just made from an anonymous account. I can trace it." Akira folded her arms. "Maria's making his next move. He knows we're hunting him. He won't stay in the shadows forever." Shanson spoke slowly. "We can lure him out." All eyes turned to her. "Maria wants to destroy you, Akira. He won't resist if we give him a chance. If you show up somewhere he believes is an easy target, he'll take the bait." Akira remained silent, considering the risks. This was dangerous, but if they did nothing, Maria would keep killing. Finally, she nodded. "All right, we do it your way." Kyle spoke up. "We need a location, somewhere Maria won't be able to resist." Shanson thought for a moment, then a slow, cold smile appeared on her lips. "I know just the place." The plan was set. Akira would be the bait. She would appear alone, in a place Maria believed he could control. But what he didn't know was that this time, she was ready. This time, Maria wasn't going to escape. The night had fallen, and the final game was about to begin. Akira stepped out of her car, the dim neon lights reflecting off the rain-slicked streets of the South Side district. She was dressed in all black, unarmed, with no backup. Everything had been carefully planned. Maria would think she was alone. But this time, he was the prey. She moved toward the abandoned warehouse, knowing he was waiting inside. He had chosen this location, believing it would give him control over the situation. But Akira wasn't afraid. She had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Maria stood in the middle of the warehouse, a gun gleaming in his hand. A smirk crossed his face when he saw her. "I'm impressed, Akira. You really came alone?" Akira remained calm, taking another step forward. "I don't need anyone else to handle you." Maria chuckled, raising the gun, aiming it directly at her. "I lost everything because of you. Do you even realize that? You destroyed my life." Akira tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady. "You destroyed yourself, Maria. I only brought the truth to light." His grip on the gun tightened, teeth clenched in rage. "You think you're above me? Just because you wear that badge, you think you have the right to stand over me?" Akira sighed. "No, I don't. But I know the difference between right and wrong. And you," she paused, voice sharp, "crossed the line a long time ago." She saw his hand tremble. His rage boiled over, but deep inside, he knew. He had already lost. All he had left was his hatred. "Then finish it, Akira." He pulled the trigger, but the moment the shot rang out, Akira was gone. She rolled to the side, moving like a shadow. The bullet tore through a wooden crate behind her, leaving a smoldering hole. Maria cursed, spinning around searching for her. But she was already behind him. A swift strike landed on his wrist, sending the gun flying from his grip. He stumbled, but before he could react, Akira slammed him to the ground. Maria thrashed, trying to fight back, but she was faster. Within seconds, he was pinned. He gasped for breath, sweat dripping from his forehead. You think you've won?" Akira said nothing. She just looked into his eyes, and that was when Maria realized. He had lost, completely. Shanson and Kyle entered moments later, guns drawn. Kyle took one look at Maria and scoffed. Nice work, Akira. Shanson signaled for the tactical team to move in, slapping a pair of cuffs onto Maria's wrists. He didn't resist anymore. He knew the game was over. Akira stood up, watching him one last time. You thought you were the predator, but from the very beginning, you were the prey. Maria let out a hollow, bitter laugh. You know what's funny, Akira? Even if I rot in prison, I'll still haunt you. You'll never escape me. Akira crouched down, her voice cold and unwavering. I don't need to escape you. I've already beaten you. He fell silent, and then they dragged him away. Outside, the rain had begun to fall. Akira lifted her gaze to the sky, inhaling deeply. Maria was gone. The game was over, but she knew the fight against men like him would never end. She turned to Shanson and Kyle. Let's go home. They walked away, leaving behind the ruins of a man who once thought he was untouchable. But in the end, justice had won. The rain continued to fall lightly on the empty streets, casting golden reflections from the streetlights onto the slick pavement. Akira stood outside the Secret Service headquarters, gripping her badge tightly. It was over. Maria had been arrested. Justice had prevailed. But the emptiness remained, a quiet pause between the most important chapters of her life. Kyle stepped beside her, his voice calm yet firm. You did well, Akira. She didn't answer immediately. She stared at her palm, still damp with sweat from the final confrontation with Maria. Everything had happened so fast, but the moment he fell, she knew. The game had truly ended. From a short distance away, Shanson watched her, sharp-eyed, as if assessing her state of mind. He won't hurt anyone ever again. Akira gave a slight nod. But there will be others, won't there? Kyle exhaled. There always are. None of them spoke further. They just stood there, listening to the rain. 2 days later, Maria's arrest dominated the headlines. The Metropolitan Police Department announced his immediate dismissal, and an internal investigation confirmed years of misconduct. Evidence of racial profiling, abuse of power, and suspicious incidents linked to him were exposed. Maria had not only lost his badge, he now faced criminal charges. His days of unchecked authority were over. Yet Akira felt no satisfaction. Justice had been served, but the system's flaws still remained. She knew this victory was just a small piece of a much larger puzzle. A week later, Akira received an unexpected call from Kyle. Can you come to my office? When she arrived, Kyle was by the window, gazing out over the city. Shanson was there too, holding a thick file. Kyle turned to face her. We've given this a lot of thought, Akira. He paused. You proved yourself in the Maria case, not just in skill, but in resolve. Akira raised an eyebrow. So, what do you want me to do? Kyle gave a slight smile, but there was something serious behind it. We want to promote you. You'd become deputy agent in charge of a new internal oversight initiative. This job isn't just about protecting VIPs anymore. It's about making sure that people like Maria never get the chance to abuse their power again. Akira was silent for a few seconds. Her career had been defined by fighting people like Maria from the outside. Now she had the chance to change things from within. She looked at Shanson, who watched her expectantly. You can say no, Shanson said. No one's forcing this on you. But if you accept, you'll have the opportunity to make a real difference. Akira took a deep breath. She remembered the times she had been doubted, underestimated, told she didn't belong. She remembered the moment Maria aimed his gun at her, thinking he controlled her fate. And she knew, if she didn't take this responsibility, who would? She straightened her back and met Kyle's gaze. I accept. 3 months later, Akira stood in a large briefing room, facing a group of young agents, people who would be the future of the Secret Service. She looked around, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "I'm not here to teach you how to shoot a gun or protect a VIP," she began, her voice steady. "I'm here to make sure you do the right thing, even when no one is watching." The room fell silent. I was once stopped by a police officer for no reason other than the color of my skin. I was threatened, I was underestimated, but I didn't let that stop me. She stepped forward, her presence commanding. "The system isn't perfect, but we can make it better, and it's our responsibility to do so." A round of applause erupted in the room. From the back, Kyle and Chanson watched, satisfied to see the change Akira was creating. She had begun this journey as someone targeted, tested, and doubted. Now she was a leader, not just someone who enforced justice, but someone who built it. The end of one chapter and the beginning of a new path. Justice isn't a destination, it's a road, and Akira would keep walking it. The lesson of Akira's story. Akira's journey is more than just a personal struggle. It's a reflection of justice, responsibility, and resilience in standing up for what is right. She was once unfairly judged, labeled by those who abused their power, but she proved that integrity cannot be stripped away by those who wield authority unjustly. She didn't just clear her own name, she exposed the corruption in the system, ensuring that those who abused their positions faced consequences. The greatest lesson from her story is that justice doesn't come from those in power, it comes from those who refuse to be silenced. To change a system, it takes more than outrage. It takes patience, strength, and the will to fight until the very end. Akira didn't just win back her own justice. She opened the door for others, ensuring that no one else would have to go through what she did. Her story is proof that truth can be buried, but it can never be erased. Because as long as there are people brave enough to stand up, justice will always find its way to the light. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting or enjoyable, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and reach more amazing viewers like you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our future uploads. Your support means the world to us and keeps us motivated to create even better content for you.